Well, I'm sure you have by now heard the absolutely horrific news from Magdeburg in Germany. Dozens of people have been injured in a deliberate attack on a Christmas market. Now, a friend of mine was actually at one of these Christmas markets, not in Magdeburg, but in Frankfurt. And it's really interesting because she saw and indeed sent me a picture of what was outside the Christmas markets. And I think I can perhaps show it on screen now, actually. It showed you the things that were not allowed in the Christmas markets. There are often bollards that are there. There are, guns, knives, horns and sprays and so on not allowed. Knuckle dusters is on their screen at the moment if you're watching. It's saying what's not allowed in those Christmas markets. And this is a horrendous echo of what happened 8 years ago when there was another attack there. For the latest on the attack last night, where about 15 people are said to be badly hurt. 4 people we know now have died. Let's get the absolute latest from a journalist in Germany, James Jackson, who is with us now. James, no doubt Germany absolutely reeling from what is happening and reaction politically, I'm sure, as well. But from the people in Magdeburg, presumably complete horror that this has happened. What do we know?
Absolutely. So I think this is actually one of the strangest stories that I've covered in my time in Germany, because this attack happened the day after the 8th anniversary of the Breitscheidplatz attack in Berlin Christmas market by an Islamic State-inspired terrorist. But it appears that this suspected attacker, has the exact opposite ideology. He's someone who fled from Saudi Arabia because of fear of persecution. He was initially from the Shia minority, but actually had become an atheist, an ex-Muslim, and a huge critic of Islam, and even a supporter of Israel. I have to say, I received this man's manifesto back in April, or at least part of it, not the entire thing, which was published exactly after the attack. So it appears that he scheduled the tweets that he sent out. He was actually very prominent. He had 40,000 followers on Twitter and had been making increasingly erratic posts about revenge against Germany. He appears to have had some theories that the police had been checking his mail, which, there was definitely some paranoia in play. He seemed to have a huge grudge against a different ex-Muslim organization called Säkulare Flüchtlingshilfe, which means sort of atheist secular refugee help. So it's definitely someone who believed in his own importance. And he said multiple times the entire nation of Germany is responsible for his persecution, among other things. So, yeah. It's really shocking.
Very strange. What do we know?
Really surprising.
What do we know about the attack? And people who are perhaps just waking up to this maybe missed the news last night. What do we know about what actually happened last night? Because we're not showing the footage in terms of the car careering into those people, because it is horrific and it does show people dying. What we are showing on the screen is the police apprehending the alleged perpetrator, and the scenes around there, and also the live scenes from the Christmas market as well. But just tell us what actually happened.
Yeah, the footage is absolutely shocking. There's some security camera footage that's been going around the internet, and you can see really that this car, this black BMW, which the perpetrator, who is reportedly a doctor, who actually worked in the clinic where his victims are now being treated, he drove straight into the mass of people. You can see not slowing down, drove for about 400 meters, which seems to have been through the entire length of the Christmas market. And then, as you can see on screen now, he managed to get out with a severely damaged car and surrounded by police, gets on the floor. So, complete security failing, it has to be said. There are even reports that one woman who was in contact with him tried to email the Berlin police. She may have actually done so, but then she also emailed Berlin, New York police with all of this information about this man threatening Germans. But this is someone who had 40,000 followers on Twitter, who's tweeting it in English, in German, and in Arabic, and some very erratic stuff that made, if the security services were watching this person, as they obviously should have been, would have raised some alarm bells. So massive security failing, not just at Magdeburg, where clearly these bollards didn't work. If there were any. But
yes, because we know from a lot of those Christmas markets, that they do have those bollards. There's been reaction to this, of course, around the world. And Starmer here, the Prime Minister here in the United Kingdom, says, "I'm horrified by the atrocious attack in Magdeburg tonight. My thoughts are with the victims, their families and all those affected. We stand with the people of Germany." What do we know about the people who have been the victims of this?
People are still being treated. Many are critically injured. There's four dead confirmed, one of whom was a small child. But there are reports after the event of up to 68 or even more than that injured, 15 or so critically injured. So, of course, this is a Christmas market. This is where people come with their family to celebrate, to feel happy before the festive season. And that was obviously the target of this man, of this suspected terrorist. So he wanted to cause as much damage as possible, for people to talk as much about his bizarre, paranoid fantasy ideology as possible. And I will say as well that initially after the attack, the far right jumped onto this and said, we have to stop the Islamization of Europe. This is very awkward for them, including the AfD, Alternative for Germany party, because actually the suspected attacker was retweeting them. He said Geert Wilders, the Dutch far-right anti-Muslim politician, and Alice Weidel, the AfD's leader, are the people to save Europe. He also supported Tommy Robinson in the UK. So I do think we have to talk about political motivations here and extremism on the right and the anti-Muslim right.
Well, it's interesting as well, James, in terms of what we actually know and what we were meant to think as well. There are lots of questions around this, and we're going to continue asking them. Thank you very much indeed. That's James Jackson, who's a journalist in Germany. And Mary in County Down has been in touch and says, here's the facts. An immigrant asylum seeker from an extreme Muslim country, which has spawned many jihadists, has targeted and murdered people in a terrorist attack on a Christian holiday festival. Whatever his supposed motivation, his previous behaviour and published statements made him a threat to German citizens. The attacker says he fled Saudi Arabia and was persecuted. What do we really know about him? He's an immigrant, so-called asylum seeker from Saudi. We need to know a lot more about his background and what the German authorities actually knew about him. Fair questions, I think, for Ralph Schoellhammer, who is a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna, who joins me now. Ralph, great to have you on this morning. What do you make of this?
Well, I think we have to look at the dimensions, and before we go into the details, let's just look at I think a major fact, which is Germany is one of the oldest Christian countries in the world, and it's now a land where if you want to go to a Christmas market, you have to fear for your life. This is as if in Turkey, which has about the same population as Germany, you would have to be afraid to go to Friday prayer because a non-Turkish person might ram your car through the people who are praying.
Yes.
So there is a migrant element to this. And I think the narrative, the framing that is emerging, that this is actually a far-right incident, that this is actually Elon Musk, the AfD and Tommy Robinson who were the motivation behind this, I think is just not true. This is very similar to what we saw happening in Rotherham and with the grooming gangs in the UK, because just as a reminder to your viewers and listeners, Germany is a country, when you make a joke about Robert Habeck, the Green Minister for the Economy, the police rings at your door. But if a guy has 40,000, as your previous guest correctly pointed out, followers on Twitter and is openly tweeting about his plans to bring war to Germany and the German people, nobody investigates the guy. And I would suspect the reason is because he was a migrant, because he had an asylum-seeking background, so the authorities turned a blind eye, just as they did in the UK.
And there are big questions for them as well. There are big questions as well about what this guy's motivations actually are, because there seem to be at least some contradictions here as well.
Well, we will find out. I do have to admit the idea that if you want to strike against the Islamization of Europe, that you kill as many Christian families at a Christmas market, that seems very odd to me. The narrative came out very quickly. I'm going to wait for the evidence to come in. But I just say, let's be very careful about this. This is a little bit kind of a reminder of what happened with Southport as well, right? Where gradually more and more information came in. And I have to say it, nobody can change that fact. If Germany would have had stricter immigration laws, right, if they would have been more careful and more observant regarding whom they let into the country, this would not have happened. So the idea what's happening on term, the German media, and I don't want to shift the topic, but this is important, to say, well, actually, this is an AfD sympathizer. Actually, this was a far-right incident. I think that's a very dangerous path to go down.
Just to say, we can see on the screen, if you are indeed watching, if you're listening on the radio, I'll describe it to you. The Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, is walking through the market now. He has gone to Magdeburg, which is, I think, about 60 miles southwest of Berlin. And that is the Chancellor, essentially the Prime Minister of Germany, going through the market now with a lot of people around him, hearing what has happened and so on. There's a lot of information as well about the alleged attacker here, Ralph, in terms of Saudi Arabia. They formally requested his extradition. That was denied by Germany, citing human rights requests. He had sort of reinvented himself as a dissident, publicly declaring himself an atheist and an ex-Muslim. I mean, how much do you think we can actually believe about his story?
Well, I would say even if the story is true, it doesn't change the broader picture, which is, number one, the so-called lone wolf apparently was a known wolf. So the Saudi Arabian authorities knew about him. Apparently, again, he was very active on social media. So this was not, and he was a well-respected, apparently, doctor, a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, as far as I know at this point.
A psychiatrist, so that's right,
Yeah, this was not some weird guy living in his mother's basement. So this is kind of this idea, you know, the kind of a lone wolf nobody knew about. Apparently that is not true. And the second point is, I don't think we should too much fixate on whether or not it was an Islamist or non-Islamist motivation. The point remains the same. The problem that we see is there's a growing number of people, very often with a migrant background from very specific areas of the world, because, you know, he was not Dutch, he was not Norwegian, he was not British, that apparently seem to be much more susceptible to acts of violence like driving a car into a Christmas market. I mean, this is, as I said, it's the same, and forgive me if I make this comparison, with what happened with the grooming gangs in the UK. It doesn't matter whether there is an explicit, you know, Islamic background to this. The point is that if cultures clash, apparently it leads to, whether it's an identity confusion or psychological problems, but these things then tend to happen. And I find the idea atrocious that in a majority Christian country, at least on paper, you apparently can no longer go to a Christmas market with your children because you have to be afraid that they get killed. And just as a quick other reminder, I mean, we saw pictures on social media where German police was frisking elderly women on whether or not they have a small pocket knife in their bag. But the guy who posts on social media, I will bring war to Germany, and I think another, he said, I think I will die this year because of what I plan to do. This guy basically passes by the system without being any questions asked. I think this is absurd. And now shifting the narrative, I really want to say this again, to kind of downplay this and say, oh, well, he reposted something from the AfD, so all of this is not really a problem. Again, it's an absurd statement.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's interesting as well. I mean, I just want to show that sign one more time that a friend of mine who was at a Christmas market in Frankfurt. I mean, there's so many Christmas markets in Germany, Austria as well. I know there are lots of places where this is a big thing. People go there. Yet as we sit here in 2024, we have these warnings on the fact that what has happened previously was 8 years ago, and indeed last night. A sign that a friend sent me. She took a picture at the Frankfurt Christmas market of no guns, knives, knuckle dusters or sprays and horns and things. I mean, these really, what should be the most wholesome of activities, what should be the most traditional and indeed enjoyable of activities, and helping those businesses make a bit of money around Christmas time, have now become a focus yet again of terrorism, Ralph.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for those of your viewers who see the picture now, they can put cars on this as well. And by the way, another very shameful role was once again played by the media. When this incident happened, this horrific incident, all the headlines were car drove into a crowd.
Car kills people. Well, someone was driving the car, and someone was driving the car and had that motivation. Yes, I heard that and saw that in a lot of the media, including the BBC Midnight News last night, which I listened to, saying a car has careered into people in Germany. I mean, it's more than that. There's a driver, and that driver has motivations, and that driver has brought an act of terror to mainland Europe.
Yeah, and now the narrative is shifting. So as long as everybody suspected that it has an Islamist background, the perpetrator in the mainstream media was the car. Now that he can be connected to the AfD, all of a sudden the perpetrator is actually the AfD. So this shows you the media is also I just want to point this out because this is going to be also a story over the next couple of days. There is a broader narrative that is also being pushed by the media, but the facts on the ground remain. This is a result of a failed migration policy. It is the consequence of authorities that are not willing to keep an eye on the migrant community, at least at specific parts of the migrant community. And it is once again proof that if you're part of a certain segment of the society, you can post extremely violent comments. And basically, he announced what he plans to do in one way or another on the internet without anybody taking a look at you. I think this is worrisome. This is a version of two-tier policing. It's just the German version of it.
Olaf Scholz now, the Chancellor of Germany, laying flowers at the point where some of those people lost their lives. We know at least 2 people have lost their lives. There are reports of 4, but that's unconfirmed. There are all sorts of floral tributes there as well. Just speaking of politicians, Ralph, I wonder what effect do you think this will happen on the various elections that are happening in Germany in a couple of months' time?
I think the effect will be quite substantial. Because this has been, migration has always been a top issue on the radar of the German people, not all over continental Europe, but also in the United Kingdom. And these incidents, these horrible incidents, it's just that most people sense that 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, these things did not happen. I mean, as I always say, there doesn't have to be a religious background, but there is, and I say this, it pains me as well, but I think we have to look the fact straight into the eye. Very often, there is a migrant background to this. And as I said, this can have many reasons, but one thing is clear, that as societies become more diverse, as they become more multicultural, they are becoming less safe. I mean, we can talk about this for hours, and I know you do on your show, Peter, as well, but there are completely new categories of crime. I mean, for example, gang rape was not really a crime element in German crime statistics 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now you have every second, third day you have one of these incidents in Germany. And again, this is very closely connected to mass migration. As I always say, I take no pleasure in saying this. So I would much rather talk with you about, Christmas songs and season's greetings and what we plan, to give to our friends and family. But unfortunately, it seems that our traditional way of lives are under threat.
Well, this is the grim reality for people in Germany and Magdeburg today. Ralph, thank you. That's Ralph Schoellhammer there, political theorist. He's a professor at Webster University in Vienna. Thank you to Joe Moore in Leicestershire, who says, how many times are these attacks going to happen before we make a stand? These attacks are a deliberate attack on our culture and our Christian nation. We cannot keep silent any longer for fear of being labelled racist. These radical Islamists have stated openly several times they want us and our values gone. It is very clear we cannot live side by side.